Okay, Simon, so we are having a series of short conversations about leadership. And at the end of our last conversation, we were talking about leaders and leadership and whether or not we need it and what it is, how we do it well. And we started to touch on this whole subject of mistake making and owning mistakes. Yes. And I've heard you or someone else before say about self-awareness and how self-awareness is a leader's greatest friend or can be our greatest enemy if we don't know ourselves. So I'd like to talk a bit about self-awareness, but then also where we get the resources from to own mistakes, like big mistakes that we make how we process that. So where do you want to start with all of that?
I mean, let's start with, self-awareness. Self-awareness does have to be learnt. And I think that's one of the things we must be aware of, is that very few people are born self-aware. Biblically, we're all born selfish. And that selfishness has to be worked out of us over the years. And for most of us, we become self-aware when we start building relationships. Because as you start building relationships, starting very early on with siblings, with parents, at school, when you start school, you begin to get some self-awareness. So, a 4-year-old goes to school, they've been the oldest, either an only child or the oldest child in the family, and parents, carers, grandparents have just loved them, and they go to school and they think the world revolves around me, and then they hit a class of 34-year-olds who all think the world revolves around them, and they suddenly discover it doesn't. And that's your first encounter, I think. It might be school, it might be a toddler group, it might be a sibling, a younger sibling is born and suddenly attention is drawn. That's when you start going, okay, I operate in a world here where there are other people and I'm processing how they treat me, and I sometimes react well and sometimes react badly. Young children don't have the language to articulate that, so you get tantrums and temper, and things get thrown and toys get broken and siblings get punched, and and really what should happen then is we should grow in our self-awareness until we get to about 25, and then we're all perfectly self-aware. And of course that would be how it would be if we didn't live in a broken world. And we do live in a broken world, and so many of us don't get to that place. And so you have to learn, and as a leader you must learn. As a leader you must choose to learn, and you do that in numbers of ways. The easiest way for most people, am I saying that because I'm an external processor? Possibly. So I was about to say the easiest way is to talk to people, but then of course I'm an external processor. But that is a way of doing it, is to say to people, how am I doing? I always seem to react like this. Why is that? And to get feedback. I mean, I had my early 30s, had a bit of a breakdown. I had some counselling. I'd never understood why anybody went to counselling before. I just thought, pull yourself together. I was a classic. Got a problem? Pull yourself together. Jesus loves you. Time. God is good. Just pray a bit harder, smile a bit broader, lift your hands a bit higher. I apologise to all the people who I treated like that before the age of 30. I then went to a counsellor. This is amazing. Here's somebody who knows me, who asks me really good questions like, why do you do that? And so relationships, healthy relationships, will help you in your self-awareness. People, again, we said in the last chat, people who love you, who aren't afraid to ask you hard questions. I had a friend come and see me recently and thank me for a question I asked them. Now, again, being an external processor, I don't remember asking them the question. They were struggling with an individual, and I said to them, why does that matter so much to you? Why does what that person think of you matter so much? And it was a really helpful question for them, because they began to answer that question. Well, why is that? And I think that's where self-awareness you really learn, is when you start asking the why questions. So really you learn by asking questions. Some people like me will do that by, Jez, why do you think I do this? Because I'm an external processor. Some people will do that, if they're an internal process, through reading, through listening, through writing. So some people journal. I journal, not all the time, but I have journaled at different seasons of my life. And that's really a way of getting your questions out. Asking questions of yourself. This happened, I reacted like that, and I know that wasn't the best way to react. It might have been a really bad way to react. It might just not have been the best way to react. Why did I do that? So I think you learn, and you learn by questioning, and you learn by asking why. Does that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, I've read elsewhere as well that there is is an interplay between times alone and times with others.
Yeah.
And obviously, as an extrovert, your answer, even the way you said it, you said it kind of graciously. Am I just saying that because I'm an external processor? Our default is I must be with people.
Yeah.
But actually, there's a lot we can learn by being alone, and there's a
Absolutely.
necessary kind of conversation between those two things. But let me just pick you up on one thing, because I'm interested in this, and I don't know how you react. You've said several times already in these conversations,
Oh, no.
because I'm an external processor, because I'm an external processor. At what point does, because I'm an external processor, become that's my rationale for, always doing this certain type, always behaving in that certain way?
Well, clearly for me, very easily.
That's not
Jez.
really a question, more about, watch out for this, I'm a Muppet friend.
I think what I'm saying is I'm aware that my process is external. I think that I don't hide behind that. So I think there's a difference between going, I'm an external processor, so I will probably handle it in this way, and going, and there's nothing I can do about that, so you'll just have to live with it. So some people do go, oh, well, of course you can't expect me to do that. I'm an external processor. Of course you can't expect me to think before I speak. I'm an external processor. Or of course you can't expect me to pray out loud. I'm an internal processor. And when you get to that, what you're doing is you're not reflecting on your personality, you're reflecting on your sin. Yeah. You're saying, this isn't my personality type, this is my identity, and that shapes how I handle every situation. I have had to learn to listen. I've had to learn that listening is not just waiting for my turn to speak. I've had to learn that, because it's not my natural. Yeah? It's not my natural inclination, it's not naturally how I process, but I recognise that I need to learn how to do it. And as you say, not excuse bad behaviour based on my personality. So it is not right to go, that's just how I am. Yeah? Well, you can't expect me to speak up, I'm an internal processor. You can't expect me to think, I'm an external. You have to learn, no, actually, that might be how I'm naturally shaped, but actually, I need to be quiet now. I need to reflect now. And sometimes I have to say to people, I can't respond to what you've said, because I know if I do, I won't do it well. I need some time. I will come back to you, but I need some time to reflect. And Jesus is our model in this. Jesus, as you said, Jesus has times in a large group. He has times in a small group. He has some times very few one-to-one, but he went away to a quiet place. He has time just on his own. And Jesus models for us perfect humanity, doesn't he, and perfect processing, and we need to learn to do that. There are times when Jesus, at one level, externally processes out there, times when he clearly works in here. So I don't think I'm hiding, but maybe I'll just come up with an answer
on the spot, because you're an
myself.
external processor.
Yeah.
And actually, you very graciously took my statement and turned it into the reason I put the question is because you're right on the statement, because we can use that as a way of hiding behind things. So I do find that helpful. And it's interesting, the solitude community thing, we're in a society that does both badly. When I'm alone, I've always got my phone, so I'm not really alone. And when I'm with others, I'm really fully present to the point that I'm willing to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
But the self-awareness, the reason we're talking about this, because I think it's so important as leaders that we know what it's like to be on the other side of us.
Yes.
So we do everything we do deliberately rather than accidentally. There's nothing worse than leaders who aren't aware of the chaos they're creating.
Yes.
So we want to grow in self-awareness, and there's lots of tools out there for that. What do you make of? How helpful are you? Think of Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder, the Enneagram's particularly popular again.
Yes.
All of those things. What are your comments on some of those things? Their usefulness and dangers.
I think they are. I think they can be helpful. I think they are tools. And I think that you must always remember about anything that's been created rather than the creator. They are tools. So I have a toolkit at home. I'm not very handy, but I do have a toolkit. I have different tools in there. And they can all help me. They can also be incredibly dangerous if I use them in the wrong way for the wrong thing. When we were first married, I had one screwdriver, one hammer, and pretty much anything we had to use one of those two things to do any job around the house. And it wasn't always helpful. And so slowly I've built up some tools. I have friends who are really into power tools. So I don't own power tools, I have friends who own power tools. And it's incredibly helpful to grab a power tool and think, well, I could be doing this by hand with this handsaw, but my friend has lent me this great circular saw and I'm going to get through this stuff much more quickly. And so I think with any of those kind of personality types, profiling, strength finders would be one, they can be really helpful. I think often they're badly used because we often just skim the surface with them, but pretend that we know more than we do. And you can go online now and do a personality test, and none of us want to pay the $99 or the £139 or whatever it is to actually do the work properly. So we do the free test, we get the free summary of who we are, and if we're not careful, we then use that summary to not only analyse ourselves, but analyse everybody else. Oh, I see, Jez, you're an EJYX. Oh, yes, you'll always react like this. And all I've done is spend half an hour online reading a very short summary, which says at the bottom, do not use this very short summary to diagnose your friends. But I like feeling clever, so I do use it to diagnose my friends. And then it causes more harm than good. Also, at times, in the same way you said, I'm an external processor, so I use that as an excuse. You can do that with the whole spectrum. Or I'm phlegmatic, or I'm melancholic, or I'm an 8 on the Enneagram, and so you can't expect me to show any compassion because I haven't done the Enneagram, so maybe 8s are very compassionate. But you can't expect me to be compassionate. I'm an 8. Well, no, I can expect you to be compassionate because God is compassionate, and God calls us to compassion. You might process your compassion in the characteristics of an 8, but that doesn't mean you can't be compassionate. And that's the biggest danger, is really what you were drawing out just now, is they become a little bit of either a straitjacket, I can never do that because I'm this, or I don't have to do that because I'm this, and that's where they're dangerous. And I'd add to that, it's probably good to pick one. So we can all be guilty of the kind of latest book syndrome. And, I've just read this, so now I'm going to let that shape my leadership for the next, until I read the next book. And we can sometimes do that. We've done Myers-Briggs, so Myers-Briggs is now going to, now we're doing Strength Finders, that's going to shape us. Or now we're doing Enneagram, that's going to shape us. They all do very similar things. And so it's much more helpful as an individual, as a family, as an organisation, to go, we're doing this. And actually, for the next 5 years, given that all of these things have strengths and weaknesses, we will use this one and we'll use it properly. We'll actually remind ourselves of our top 5 strengths on a regular basis. We'll actually work through it as a team. We'll review, we'll reflect, we'll come back to it in a year, and then 2 years, and then 3 years. Now, at some point in that 5-year cycle, you might go, right, that's been really helpful for that season. What might we use for the next season? But I think that is a better way of using it.
I think that's great wisdom. The reason I kind of bring up and talk a bit about profilings, and one of the things that I'd love to kind of almost set up as a subject for what we can talk about next is, I remember I did psychologists say that your personality is very fixed and rarely changes much across your life.
Okay.
And so one profile I did, I found it incredibly accurate. And so it became like this mirror that told me who I was, and it wasn't fixed, which meant all of my strengths I saw, but all of my bad bits I saw, and it told me, you're never going to change. And I kind of had to detox from them a bit because I realized the mirror I'm supposed to look at should actually be a window that takes me to Christ. So that's my identity, is what he says I am, not what this strength finder, whatever it is, tells me I am. And so I'd love to have a conversation, having talked about the importance of self-awareness, I'd love to have a conversation about how we ensure that our identity is found in Christ and not in these things around us, which I think could help us as leaders too.